I've already tried to record this video once already, and I forgot to turn on my mic. So we're gonna try this again. What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. I am back on it with the Zutara videos because recently I have just found my people with them. I have been loving the comments you've been leaving on my other Zutara videos. I have enjoyed getting to talk to some of y'all and have a conversation about Zutara with some of y'all. It's been just so much fun, and it's inspired me to make even more Zutara videos, which is why we're here today. So I have been thinking and brewing over Zutara. Even though I've made two videos for a case for Zutara, I wanted to look at the ship of Zutara through a different lens, and that is the lens of storytelling. As we all know, storytelling can very easily make or break a show, and Avatar is widely praised and regarded for its storytelling and world building, and it's regarded for having one of the best redemption arcs in history, aka Zuko. In Avatar, the thematic writing and the storytelling showcase what I believe is the perfect setup for a couple that defies the odds of their cultures, the war, and follows the stories of the lore Avatar establishes. Enter Zutara. So I'm going to kind of make this video in the lens of the storytelling found within Avatar itself without putting too much of my personal opinion on it. Of course, there's going to be a little bit just because that's how it works. But rather, we're going to analyze the evidence found within the show. And as many writers, book lovers, and show lovers do, critically think about what the evidence shows and explains how the themes of this show lead to an ending where Zutara makes more sense than Katang. I also got some help from some of my fellow Zutara members, and I will be reading some of y'all's comments throughout this video. So I will definitely be relying heavily on what y'all said as well, because y'all have influenced this video a lot. And I also wrote down my notes so I don't forget what I'm going to be talking about here. So if you ever see me looking at my phone, that is probably why. So without further ado, let's get into the first thematic point, and that is Tui and Law. The story of Tui and Law seems pretty simple at the surface level. Ko says this in the season 1 finale, The Siege of the North, when Aang is in the spirit world. This is what Ko says about Tui and Law. Says their spirit names are Tui and Law, push and pull, and that has been the nature of their relationship for all time. Tui and Law, the moon and ocean, have always circled each other in an eternal dance. They balance each other, push and pull, life and death, good and evil, yin and yang. Now there is a lot to be said about Tui and Law and the dynamic between them. Tui and Law are not opposites, though that is sometimes what people perceive them to be with the comparisons with yin and yang. Instead, they push and pull one another and balance each other, just as Ko states. Also, Tui and Law are from the same element of water. That is another case of them not being opposites. The idea of Tui and Law in Avatar is not about opposing personalities or people trying to mesh together. It's about two forces that make each other move, react, and balance each other out. Just as the koi fish constantly circled each other in the pool, Tui and Law are representative of what connects and draws people to and from one another. Take Zuko and Katara, for example. They are not opposites. Their personalities complement each other's quite well, actually. And the goals they have coincide with their own personal beliefs. For Katara, her main goal is ending the war. It's the hope she possesses that drives her towards this end. Whether it be a hope that the Avatar will end the war or that it'll eventually come to an end. Zuko shares a similar goal, ending the war by finding the Avatar. It is the hope he possesses of pleasing his father and gaining his father's approval that pushes Zuko into action. Now their goals are different and their hope is different, which puts them on opposing sides at first. but it is the same drive within them that pushes and pulls the other to action. Zuko is determined to capture Aang. Aang represents the hope of his father approving of him. Katara is determined to keep Aang safe. Aang represents the hope of the war ending. And also, there's darkness in Katara. The hatred that she possesses for the Fire Nation and Firebenders in particular for what they did to her mother. It is often shadowed against her bright positivity and caring personality, but there are plenty of moments throughout the show, even in season 1, where that hatred seeps out. And there's light in Zuko. Deep down, he possesses a heart that cares for others and wants to protect the innocent. But his brashness and desire for his father's approval overshadows his kindness in the first half of the show. In light, there's darkness. In darkness, there's light. These two characters share so many similarities and complement each other's differences, especially in their elements. Fire is often represented as a harsh, cruel element only meant to destroy. Yet it is explained in Season 1, Episode 16, The Deserter, and again in Season 3, Episode 13, The Firebending Masters, that fire is life itself. It is not just destruction and brutality, it depends on how it's used. And though it's not mentioned directly, we see that same duality with waterbending. Water is meant to heal and bring life to what is around it. But like we see in cases like Hama from Season 3, Chapter 8, The Puppet Master, water can also be used to do horrifying things. Controlling another person like a puppet through their blood is absolutely horrifying. Yet that cruelty of waterbending exists. Katara has used bloodbending as the worst of waterbending, learning how to abuse the power she's been given. Zuko has used fire as the best of firebending, learning how not to abuse the power he's been given. The Twee and Law dynamic works almost too well with these characters. Not just because of their elements, but because their personalities coincide with one another very well. Katara makes Zuko question things about himself. Zuko supports Katara and listens to her, not once dismissing her anger or hatred because he knows it's valid. Katara recognizes the good in Zuko and pushes him towards that end, and ends up hurt when he betrays her. Zuko tells her his story. The first person we verbally hear him say it to is Katara. Katara listens to him and explains her own prejudices. They are constantly pushing and pulling one another throughout the show, bettering the other and wanting each other to keep getting better. There are so many examples of Twee and Law when it comes to these two, but I just don't have enough time to do all of them. But the thematic device of Twee and Law being placed at the end of Season 1 during the Siege of the North, when we have these two different forces converging, is a huge foreshadowing setup that continues to play out in the remainder of the show. Which leads to the next big thematic piece for Zutara in the show, the Cave of Two Lovers. Avatar is fantastic when it comes to world building and the lore behind its people, places, and even traditions. The Cave of Two Lovers is no different. It is built up as an important part of Omashu's history, and the lore of how the city was built foreshadows what could possibly happen at the end of the war with the Fire Nation. Now, the story of the two lovers is tragic. Two people from separate villages found one another yet couldn't be together due to their villages being enemies. But their love found a way. After learning earthbending, they built a labyrinth of tunnels so they could meet in secret. Tragically, the man, Shu, died in the war between the two villages. As a result, the woman, Oma, unleashed her wrath upon the villages, declaring the war over. And both cities came to build a new city together where all could live in peace. And the story ends with a quote Katara reads, "Love is brightest in the dark." Think about that quote, love is brightest in the dark. What is one of the darkest times in a person's life? War. I digress. That's not the point. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. But from this story, looking at its surface level, we can tell three things from it already. 1. Two people from opposing forces found a way to be together. 2. Sacrifices for each other were made. And 3. Peace was ultimately achieved and the two warring nations came together to live in peace. Now, if this doesn't ring bells of foreshadowing for the current state that the Avatar world is in, I don't know what would. There are currently two warring villages in the Avatar world when we hear this story. The Fire Nation and the rest of the world. I know it's technically the Water Tribe and the Earth Kingdom, but it's essentially the Fire Nation versus the other nations. Fire Nation versus the rest of the world. When you think of the characters and the story we know when we hear this story for the first time in Season 2, Episode 2, there are really only two characters with their previous interactions that this story could fit. Zuko and Katara. Now, some people say that in this point of the show, there haven't been enough interaction between the two of them to warrant this kind of assumption, but I beg to differ. Season 1, Episode 9, The Waterbending Scroll. That episode alone has so much tension between them. It has incredible banter between them, and it sets up so much, especially with the necklace. Season 1, Episode 14, The Fortune Teller. It is not a direct interaction, but the prediction of the fortune teller telling Katara she's going to marry a powerful bender is extremely important, and I actually love what someone said about this in the comments. So, Draw with Cupcake commented about the fortune teller episode, and they said this about it. The fortune teller tells Katara that her love will be with a powerful bender. We're meant to assume that means Aang, because obviously, but it's left pointedly vague. She didn't say Avatar or even a powerful airbender, which leaves the possibility for a pairing other than Aang. Then the camera cuts to a scene of Zuko. First of all, thank you for pointing out that it does cut to a scene of Zuko. That is, again, another piece of foreshadowing that just is in the show. But yes, I completely agree with this comment. We are not told that Katara is going to straight up marry Aang, that she's destined to marry him. We're only told she's destined to marry a powerful bender. Zuko is a very powerful bender. Season 1, Episode 15, Bato of the Water Tribe. This is the first wrong assumption made by June that Katara and Zuko were or are dating. It is also the wrap up of the whole necklace side point, which has a lot of implications behind it that we're not going to get into in this specific video. But it wraps up that whole necklace business as well in that episode. And then Season 1, Episode 19 and 20, The Siege of the North. Now you cannot tell me that the interactions between these two not only parallel Twee and Law, but are the perfect setup for the Cave of Two Lovers story. And there is some great tension between them in their interactions and in their fight in those episodes. And from this interaction, we get one of the best lines to sum up their dynamic at this point in time from Zuko, when he says, "You rise with the moon, I rise with the sun." Now, there are a lot of connections we could draw from episodes where they don't interact with each other and just draw the plot points to connect them, but I think that would take way too long. And I would feel like I was giving a lesson over Zutara at that point. So we'll just focus on these interactions for now. Now, they obviously meet before Season 1, Episode 9, but their main interactions are from that point on in the season that lead up to this Cave of Two Lovers story. Drawing a conclusion of two people being from warring nations being those two specifically is not that far of a stretch. Are they in love? No, not at this point. Not at all. They are still on opposing sides. They are still enemies when we hear this story, which leaves a lot of the plot threads just kind of dangling there as foreshadowing. And that foreshadowing sets up what happens in the rest of Season 2 and in Season 3. It also brings the idea of their characters and what their characters might be willing to do for the other to bring peace and keep them safe, and what they would do to find and bring peace to their kingdoms. Like, I don't know, what Zuko does for Katara at the end of Season 3, and what Katara then does for Zuko, and how the war ends with Zuko, but that's a discussion for later. The foreshadowing in the story should actually bring worry to these two characters. Are they going to meet the same tragic ending as the story of the lovers? In a way, Zuko almost does, but yet they would change their ending for a much happier one. The foreshadowing should also lead the audience away from the romance of Katara and Aang. There is no build-up or setup for their type of relationship in the lore or world building of Avatar. So looking at the story from a storytelling perspective, it indicates two opposing characters coming together to help end the war, and foreshadows a romance between the two characters. And at the end of season 2, we see that start to come to fruition. And I have some comments on this that y'all put, and I love them so much. I'm going to read what they say about it. So this one is also from Draw with Cupcake, and they say this. The Forbidden Lovers story was clearly supposed to parallel some kind of romance within the show. But whose? Because Katara and Aang were never actually forbidden. They weren't from warring tribes and were separated by a mountain that they had to carve tunnels in order to meet in secret. The only thing that kept Katara and Aang from getting together was the fact that Katara just wasn't that into him. But do you know who Katara was warring with? Who she did end up connecting with in the underground cave, filled with crystals that were kind of similar to the ones in the Lover's Cave. Connected with so quickly that she almost gave him her super special magic healing water just to fix his scar, even though it could potentially save someone's life. Yes, I totally agree with that. I have another one here, and I'm so sorry if I say your name wrong. I'm going to do my best to pronounce it right. Prickly_Prosianids. Please let me know if I got that right, and tell me how to pronounce it down below so I don't do that again. But they said, the Cave of Two Lovers being directly paralleled with the cave and crystals in the Crossroads of Destiny where Zuko and Katara locked, and how this is obviously not a mistake or coincidence by the animators. Absolutely, it's definitely not a mistake. It's not even close to being a mistake. They definitely did that on purpose as further foreshadowing in the show with these two characters. That season 2 finale is just the perfect lead up. That season 2 finale is the perfect lead up to the lore of the story. It's where we see their dynamic, the hints we've gotten through the first 2 seasons, blossom. Zuko takes the hatred from Katara. He doesn't dismiss it, doesn't argue back. Katara lets Zuko have it. Lets him know what the war has done, what he's doing to the people of the world, and finally expressing how she's personally suffered from it. Now, Katara has talked about her mom before, that is no secret. But this is the first time she is broken down in tears talking about it in front of someone who's supposed to be an enemy. And Zuko opens up to her immediately after, talking about his innermost thoughts and even talking about his mom, which he has told no one about. Again, to a supposed enemy. Their dynamic from that moment on permanently shifts. For them to switch so quickly, to trust one another so quickly, not just Katara either. Zuko had to trust Katara to come up and touch his scar to allow her to heal him. Their dynamic just fully blossoms, and they become the embodiment of the story of the Cave of Two Lovers. Now, of course, this definitely has a different ending because Zuko ends up betraying Katara and they end up on opposing sides again. But there is still a payoff for this story. In season 3, Zuko redeems himself and does anything he can to get Katara's forgiveness. In the process, he realizes there's something Katara needs more than for him to prove himself. It's closure. He helps her heal that wounded inner child, much like Katara helps heal his. She started to heal him back in that cave with the gesture of healing his scar. And once he joined and her forgiveness was earned, she is constantly there to support him and back him up. She's the one who noticed his struggle when he was going to confront Iroh, comforted and consoled him, listened to his fears, and encouraged him. And for the end of the story, Katara and Zuko worked together in the finale to do their part of ending the war to bring peace. Zuko makes the ultimate sacrifice for Katara. And unlike Shu in the original story, Katara is able to save Zuko's life. But the two of them together take down Azula to end the war and bring peace. Of course, Aang had to defeat Ozai or it wouldn't have worked, but those two specifically played a massive role in making sure the war ended in a peaceful manner. And Zuko takes his place as Fire Lord and declares the war over, and then begins to work on bringing the world together to live in peace. That sounds familiar. The payoff for the foreshadowing was quite literally just dangling there right in front of us. And then they cut us off at the end. It's so disappointing. So, thinking critically about the end of the war with the evidence compiled just by these two thematic details of storytelling woven into the story, it would be an easy assumption to make that Katara and Zuko should have ended up together. Aang's story aside, I'm going to make a separate video about Katang and why I don't particularly like their dynamic. But the story of Zuko and Katara were woven together so beautifully that it just felt like it just got burned off at the end. Because Zuko, the banished prince, with the sole hope of his father's love to capture the Avatar, chases that hope before growing due to influences around him and a heavy influence from his uncle, realizes that his hope and his goals need to be to end the war to bring about peace. And Katara, this motherly figure with the sole hope of the Avatar being the one to save the world, experiences many different things that opens her eyes to the realization of her own hatred and realizes that the world is not what she originally deemed it to be. With that, she pushes her personal growth to become stronger and decides that her only hope and goal shouldn't be just to rely on the Avatar to save the world, but she will do anything she can to help stop the war. They were enemies. They were rivals. They were trusted confidants. They were friends, and they, in my opinion, were soulmates. The Tui and Law and K-2 lovers payoff would have been perfect if Katara had ended up with Zuko. And the two worked simultaneously together to push for that new world, that place where everyone could live together in peace, reigning together to search for the best way to reunite the broken nations, their hope being the same, and they continually push one another to be better. They continually support each other, listening to one another, encouraging one another. I truly believe Zutara would have been the perfect endgame couple, both thematically and storytelling wise. Now, we only dived into 2 major themes in this video, but there are so many more. If we really took a deep dive into Avatar and the themes that are in it, we would be able to find evidence for Zutara all over. But that would be way too long a video, so we're just sticking with the 2 for right now. But let me know what you think of this video. If I've missed anything big about these 2 themes, let me know down in the comments below. I love hearing from y'all and hearing your opinions and thoughts on these matters, especially because y'all know me so well when it comes to Zutara. And I love having conversations with y'all. I love seeing your comments. Thank you so much for your comments on my other videos. That it just makes me so happy. Once I get a community tab, it'll be so much easier to talk to y'all between videos and just have good conversations with y'all about not just Zutara, but other things as well. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this Zutara video, and this will definitely not be the last Zutara video I make. I'll probably be making more, and I will be making a Katang video in the future. Probably gonna have to break that up into 2 parts because there's just so much I have to say about it. But until then, thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's a little bit longer, so I appreciate you sticking around to the end. But other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, week, month, and I will see you next time, scholars.